Welcome back to the Andrew and Ian Show. I'm Andrew Surwick here again with Ian. Hi, Ian. We witnessed a very depressing weekend as members or as people just born in the state of Michigan this weekend. Uh, I'm still gonna ask, how are you doing this evening, man?
I mean, pretty cold, but outside of, the events that took place over the weekend, not too bad.
Yeah. Just depressing all around. Both in the college football world and the pros for us Michiganders. Let's get into it this weekend. We'll start with the NFL. We had on Saturday afternoon, we had the Chiefs hosting the Texans. The Chiefs win this one 23-14. And yeah, it was just one of those games where Kansas City's defense did what they needed to do, and that was keep C.J. Stroud and the Texans out of the end zone. One touchdown was scored in the entire game, and that was by Joe Mixon. Um, and yeah, that was it for them. They did not look good. They could not finish drives. They punted a lot. They outgained Kansas City in this game by well over 100 yards, and they still ended up losing this game because Kansas City's defense was able to do a hell of a lot to just stop this Texans offense. Now, obviously, they're missing Tank Dell, so that doesn't help. And that offensive line is not that good either. But CJ Stroud went 19 for 28, 245. And Mahomes went 16 for 25, 177 and a touchdown. Um, it was just a really good game from Kansas City's defense, and they're gonna be playing host to in the AFC title game.
It was a relatively okay game, I'd say, as a fan of neither of these teams. I mean, at one point though, I do want to emphasize, I don't remember if it was in the third or the fourth quarter, but the penalties in this one, it was Houston had 8 for almost 100 yards. Up to that point, Kansas City had 2 for 22 yards. It's a big problem. And whether or not how many of those were, phantom calls or, refs are playing favorites for Kansas City calls, you can never win a playoff game when you're playing like that. Shooting yourselves in the foot for almost 100 yards doesn't matter that you outgained them by over 100 yards when you pretty much lost that yardage due to penalties and you lost the game by 9 points. It could have been a better game from Houston. At the end of the day, we all kind of figured this is how this one was going to end up. Is Kansas City was going to win, and Houston was going to be left with the questions of can they actually be that team? Are they actually, you know, a good team, or are they just benefactors of a shit division?
I think it's kind of a mix of the both. I mean, the rest of their division's incompetent outside of maybe Indy. If they can, figure out their quarterback situation. Speaking of which, Indy hired a new defensive coordinator today. Forget who. I think it was Cincinnati's old OC. So, anyways, yeah. But from Kansas City's perspective, I mean, they did exactly what they needed to do, and they slowed down this Texans offense. And again, when you can hold that Texans offense to just scoring one touchdown in the entire game, yeah. And the penalties, they suck. I mean, some of them you're like, okay, why is this getting penalized? But Kansas City can do that and get away with it. Like, yeah, not ideal. But anyways, yeah, it was just a tough game to watch for Houston fans because you, you couldn't score a touchdown. You scored only one this entire game, so it was just terrible all around. And this is where it starts getting depressing for you and I. Lions hosting the Commanders. The Commanders with the upset win 45 to 31. Um, yeah, there's a lot to get into here. I mean, Jared Goff, all those interceptions that he threw in this game, he looked terrible. And the fumble, um, you know, the offense cost them this game. Now, yes, 31 points, despite having 4 turnovers, is still very impressive. And they won games with, five, with Goff throwing for 5 picks and still scoring less than 31 points. But this defense was so depleted for the Lions that you're not going to stop this Commanders offense when you have a lot of backups playing. Um, Especially on that defensive line, it was atrocious. The pass rush was atrocious, and Jaden Daniels was the best player on the field because of it. 22 for 31, 299, 2 touchdowns from him, no picks. Really, really solid game from Jaden Daniels. Jared Goff, we mentioned the interceptions, 3 of them, 23 for 40, 313 yards. Outside of those turnovers, one was a pick six, so that's, 3 points right there for the Commanders. But the Commanders scored every time they touched the ball. So Lions defense really, really stunk it up. Um, and yeah. Um, Also, the other thing that makes this game really depressing as well is Ben Johnson is now the head coach of the Chicago Bears. So really, really kicking us in the pants.
That would bother me more if I didn't think that that was part of the reason why the offense played like they did. Ben Johnson was ready to leave before this game played out. He was already making calls about his staff in Chicago. Both him and Aaron Glenn were not ready for this game, and the play showed. I mean, why the hell are you having Jamison Williams throw a pass with 10 minutes left in the third quarter? Why? That's been my problem with Ben Johnson since he's been OC for the Lions, is he gets too cute in certain moments when you don't need to. And that was one of the real momentum killers. And sure, like you said, Jared Goff had a very bad game. I mean, throwing the interception right before halftime when you're driving for points, and you could have taken the lead right there, and you didn't because you threw an interception. That's not how you want to end a half. And then Washington comes back, and they get the ball coming out of the half. And that was one of the few stops that the defense got all day. I think they got 2 stops on defense. And one was in a fourth down stop, and the other was coming right out of halftime. That was it. So when your offense gives the ball away and your defense can't get a stop, you're not going to win a game, playoff or otherwise. And this was just a culmination of every bad thing that we've seen with this Lions team all in one. Every game that they've played against a playoff team with a mobile quarterback, they lost this year. You can look back last year when they went to Baltimore. They got smoked in Baltimore by Lamar. That's Aaron Glenn's kryptonite. And he still refuses to adjust to it. Now, you can point at Terrion Arnold and say, he steals the edge on that one stop. He makes that stop. Sure, 100%. That's still on the defensive coordinator. If your players aren't making those decisions, and he's a rookie, he's going to make those mistakes. In the biggest games of their career, of their professional career, to some of these guys won national championships and whatnot in college and everything, you can't have those mistakes. And it starts with the coaching staff. And I don't think the coaching staff themselves, outside of Dan Campbell, were prepared for this game. Their minds were elsewhere. At the end of the day, if I'm Ben Johnson, I'm taking that opportunity. I'm going where the money is because, head coaching job's paying more than an OC job. I'd still, want to win this game, make my record look even prettier, especially if the Lions were to go all the way like everyone wanted to see them. Now it's just all right, he got the job, but he choked in the first round of the playoffs or second round of the playoffs because they got the first round bye. You want to see it go out on a higher note, but Jaden Daniels, what a fucking pick for Washington. Bottom line,
Yeah,
the best player on that field.
best pick in the draft. I mean, plain and simple, he was the best pick in the draft. And the way he just looked so calm and collected, um, in this game as a rookie, he didn't look rattled at all. I mean, yeah, and also, I mean, there's a lot of fucking terrible calls in this game. I mean, the what should have been a not targeting because it's not a fucking uh, targeting's not a penalty in the NFL, but the hit to the head on Jared Goff not being called was absolutely asinine. Um, but yeah, I mean, you nailed it too with Ben Johnson. Is like he clearly was not prepared for this game. He was too busy doing interviews, and that's why there needs to be a rule in the NFL where you cannot interview someone who is in the playoffs until that team is eliminated. So yeah, it really really sucks as a Lions fan, seeing what has happened here, but yeah, I mean the defense with injuries too. I mean that definitely doesn't help at all. So yeah, hopefully Dan finds the right people for the job at OC and DC,
You know,
because
Robert Saleh's currently out of a job.
I mean,
He used to play
I
DC. He
like it
used to be a DC in
in San Francisco.
San Francisco, and he's a Dearborn man.
I,
All I'm saying.
just bring that man home. Just bring him home. I like where your head's at on that. But yeah, bring in Robert Saleh and you know, there we go. Oh, imagine Robert Saleh working with fucking Aiden, man. Whew.
And that's another bright spot for the Lions is
Right,
you don't have any more games to injure your defense further.
right.
Everyone's getting healthy from this point on. So, and losing Amik Robertson in the first quarter was huge for this defense. I mean, already depleted, and you just lost your best guy. That
Right.
was the nail in the coffin right there.
Yep. That it was. But anyways, moving on. Sunday, the Eagles hosting the Rams. The Eagles win this one 28-22. Matt Stafford moves to 1-9 in games with snow. A terrible, terrible record, but he's played in the dome pretty much his entire life. Because when he was at Georgia, obviously in college he was outside, but it's Georgia, so nice weather, and then playing with the Lions and the Rams, most of your games are indoors. So there's that. But anyways, the the Eagles did a really really good job all around. Jalen Hurts 15 for 20, 128 yards, doing what he needed to do. They used Saquon effectively, 26 carries, 205 yards, with a long of 78, and then 2 touchdowns to add to that as well. Jalen Hurts also rushing for a touchdown in this game. Kyron Williams had a pretty solid game as well for the Rams, 19 for 106 yards. But ultimately, when it came down to it, Rams on a drive very, very late in the game, and they are unable to get a touchdown to seal this game, essentially. Having because then you would have to force the Eagles to have Jalen Hurts throw it downfield, and that can get you into trouble sometimes. And in the cold weather, it's obviously very hard to catch the ball too. So. But yeah, at the end of the day, Rams just falling short yet again. Their defense played very, very well overall, but the offense just falling short in the most critical of times.
you got to give this Rams defense credit for a Philly O line that is talked about in the likes of being up there with Detroit in terms of how good their O line is. The Rams D got him for 7 sacks. It's their second game where they've put up over 5 sacks in a playoff game. That's pretty damn good. Now, ultimately, those 7 sacks didn't really get them anywhere. They lost the game, but you said it. Matthew Stafford doesn't have a very pretty record in cold weather games, and you can probably attribute that to his time in the SEC because as we've seen continuously now, SEC teams cannot play in the cold, and even in the NFL, that started to translate. You look at Miami with Tua, cannot play in the cold, and here we are. Jalen Hurts only threw for 128 yards. Granted, he had 5 incompletions, but he went to Oklahoma, so you'd assume maybe he could play, but this is something that they haven't been doing, or they've been doing all year. Jalen Hurts won't beat you with his arm. He's thrown for over 300 yards, I think, one time this year. It's all been Saquon Barkley. And that's all you have to do. Is you stop Saquon Barkley from having the game that he has. And even the last time these two teams played in the regular season, it was Saquon Barkley. Saquon got him for 205 yards and 2 touchdowns this game. And that's how you lose the game. You have one person run for 200 yards on you. Easily. The number one way to lose a game. Because not only are you running 200 yards off of clock, that's, 2 touchdowns worth of yardage right there. And he got the 2 touchdowns. It was a crazy game. And for the Rams to walk away only down 6 points at the end, gotta give them a little bit of credit.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, the Rams' offense played very well overall in this game, I would say. It's just in those very critical moments, especially, on that last drive of the game that they had, you know, they just couldn't finish the job, and it's something that's plagued them over the last few years now. I mean, it doesn't even have to be, looking at it in playoff games, but in regular season games too. They just fall short very very often, and yeah, they ultimately fall short yet again. And then lastly, Sunday night, we had the Bills hosting the Ravens. The Bills win this one 27-25. Mark Andrews, man, you had the 2-point conversion in your hands, and you were wide open, and you dropped it. Granted, Lamar could have thrown a better ball there and made it easier to catch, but still, you could have had it, and you'd ultimately just, I don't know what the fuck happened, but it was a quick, mental lapse. He also fumbled in this game, which you never want to see. And Lamar Jackson did not have a good game, in my opinion. One, he fumbled, and he lost that fumble. He also threw a pick. Yes, he went 18 for 25, 254 yards, and 2 touchdowns, but he cost his team 2 possessions in this game, and that really, really hurt them. And Derrick Henry rushed for only 84 yards, so that trend continued of, losing games when Derrick Henry does not go for 100 yards. But what I think really what it was Buffalo forced Baltimore to be one-dimensional in this game. They weren't able to run the ball as effectively as they would have wanted to. Lamar Jackson going 6 for 39 is not normal. He rushes for a lot more than that. But they just weren't. But Buffalo's defense, credit's due, man. They did a great job of making sure Baltimore couldn't run the ball the way they wanted to in this game. And then on the flip side too, Buffalo's offense played a very, very solid game. I mean, Josh Allen went 16 for 22 and 127 yards. James Cook had a really, really, really good game as well, 17 for 67. And then Josh Allen rushing for 2 touchdowns in this game. Ray Davis rushing for a touchdown as well. All around, Buffalo was able to move the ball very effectively in this game, and obviously they capitalized on those turnovers that Baltimore handed them.
Baltimore, like the Lions, had questions with their defense coming in, and they were answered. Their defense fell back to where they were, and like you said, Derrick Henry did not run for 100 yards. The Ravens lost the game. It's about as simple as you can put it. I mean, Lamar didn't have his typical, playoff Lamar game where he's throwing multiple interceptions, and he is the reason that the team lost this game. I mean, but you can't sit there and blow off the interception and the fumble because Mark Andrews dropped a 2-point conversion that Lamar threw him. It's time to start asking questions. Is Lamar really capable of winning in the playoffs? Can he get you that Super Bowl? I think he's more than capable. He has the weapons, and Zay Flowers being out, sure, it's a big deal. But every team is playing with injuries in the playoffs at this point. And if you're not, you're the lucky one. And here we are. The Ravens were 2 points away. Their season starts with a close loss and ends right at the goal line with a drop 2-point conversion. It's about as bad as you can get.
Yeah, it was just awful all around for Lamar. You know, and we touched on it on the preview episode last Thursday. We said, whoever loses this game, I between these two, I don't think either one of them is gonna be considered that guy going forward for their team, because it was do or die for both of them. Now for Josh Allen, it's really, really do or die this coming weekend. But regardless, if you really think about it, I mean, now there's question marks about Lamar. Can he actually get you where you want to go? Because he's going to give you great regular seasons, but he always seems to fall short and play terribly in the playoffs, in big games, in big moments, and you can't have that if you're trying to win a Super Bowl.
No, not at all. I mean, we saw it with Jared Goff with the Lions. I mean, 4 turnovers just from him, 3 picks and a fumble. Cost the Lions the game. I mean, like we said, we can blame it on the defense, but when your defense, your defense isn't getting you stops, and you're handing the ball to the other team. I mean, granted, it's not on purpose. It's not as simple as you're holding the ball out and giving it to them, but you might as well, right?
Yeah, in those critical moments where you can't have a turnover, like Baltimore did on multiple occasions, you take away just one of those turnovers, Baltimore wins this game. They absolutely win this game, but critical mistakes will cost you games in this league. Remember, offense wins you games in the regular season. Defense wins you games in the playoffs, and credit to Buffalo's defense getting those turnovers at critical times. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you can't be making those mistakes offensively. Yeah. Anyways, that wraps up your NFL divisional round review. Now we head to last night. We named our college football national champions, and it is none other than number 8 Ohio State. They defeat Notre Dame 34-23, and this is where, as just this is why I said it wasn't just depressing for Lions fans this weekend. It was just depressing for people that just live in the state of Michigan because the Lions obviously lost, but also Ohio State is now a national champion the year after Michigan wins their national championship. Um, anyways, 34-23 is final score, um, and Ohio State just flat out dominated this game. Um, Notre Dame was out of this game. It was 21-7 at the half for Ohio State. They kick off the third quarter. They put up another touchdown, and then they kick a field goal. And then late third quarter, uh, Notre Dame starts to show some fight. They get a touchdown. It's 31-15. And then their fourth quarter, they just looked terrible until garbage time, where they scored another touchdown. And then Ohio State just seals it with a 33-yard field goal with 26 seconds left to make it a final score of 34-23. Will Howard had a pretty standard game for him: 17 for 21, 231, two touchdowns. Riley Leonard 22 for 31, 255 yards, two touchdowns. Solid game from both these quarterbacks, but ultimately Notre Dame's size difference, it didn't really affect them much, being a smaller team in the Georgia game and the Penn State game, but you could tell those games took tolls on their players because they looked worn down, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They looked very, very worn down and tired. And Ohio State's much larger size was able to just grind this Notre Dame defense in particular into the ground, and just unrelenting of that offense from them. They played a very, very solid game on both sides of the ball too. I mean, letting Riley Leonard only run for 40 yards on 17 carries. That's actually really, really good. Riley Leonard usually rushes for a lot more than 40 yards if he runs 17 times in a game. But ultimately, yeah, Ohio State national champions. Yeah, your thoughts on the game before I want to get to my next point here.
I mean, what else can you say? I mean, the best team in the nation on paper, or what people said was the best team in the nation on paper, won it all at the end of the year. And who do we have sitting at the end? It's not number one. It's not number two. It's not 3 or 4. But you got 7 and 8 in the national championship game. 12 was a cool experiment. I think you go 8 next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is too. I think 12 is just too many teams. I mean, realistically, again, when you really, really look at it, every single year, there's only really 3 teams that are really, truly capable and deserving of a national title. And that's the thing too, is the regular season doesn't mean nearly as much as it did, last year, or in the 14 playoff format, or even before the first ever playoff format in the BCS. Still, you had to have a perfect season, and now you don't have to have a perfect season anymore. You can drop a game or two, and still make the playoffs. You don't even have to win your conference championship. You don't even have to make your conference championship game to make the playoffs. As long as you win 10 games, you're good. And ultimately, I mean, that's what Ohio State did. They gamed the system, and that's that. But I don't like 12 teams. I think it's way too many teams, teams for the college football playoff. Because again, most of these games were blowout games, and hell, realistically, this was a blowout game as well. And I mean, even in the 14 playoff, you had most of the games. I think it was like 53% of the semifinal games in the 14 playoff were blowout games. Um, I can name a few, but like Alabama and Michigan State, where Michigan State,
Like
didn't score anything in
beat you
that game.
38 nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or there was a game where Ohio State didn't score, in the semifinals. So I mean, realistically, I think a 12-team playoff really doesn't work. And again, now you're making the regular season matter even less than it used to, and that's what made college football so great. Is that every single game mattered? Because if you had one loss, that's probably your chances of a national title out the window, unless you had a really good resume otherwise. Um, and that's why we love college football. But now you don't have to win your biggest games, um, and you can still make the playoffs. I mean, look at Indiana this year. They had one big game this entire year. They lost it, and they still got in the playoffs. Um, and that's where I think the 12-team playoff really isn't that great. It's a cool experiment, I think, but I think you could just get rid of it because you are you're discrediting what college football should be, and that should be having the best possible season ever to be able to have a chance to play for a national title.
Yeah, I mean, at a certain point, you got to say, how many teams do you really want here? Because 12 is almost half of the top 25. And we know by the end of the year that more than half of the top 25 isn't deserving of a national title. And now, granted, some of these fans of these teams are probably going to say, yeah, we are, blah, 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 blah. And specifically in a team like Indiana's case, where their only big game they played against a ranked team, they lost. And they were smoked. They still made the playoffs. But in an 18 playoff, your bottom seed is Ohio State, who just won the national championship. So I think, and a team like Ohio State, they're in the same boat as Indiana as far as they didn't play in their championship or conference championship, but they didn't even go to the conference championship, and they still made the playoffs. Ohio State was a better team than Indiana. Ohio State was that team that beat Indiana. And sure, Ohio State, you lost to Michigan at the end of the year. Whatever head coach in your history said, you don't win the game, you don't win a national championship, or you don't count that national championship. That's just an ego thing. Sure, you can lose to Michigan all you want. As long as you win a national championship, I'm cool with it. But at the end of the day, for Notre Dame, you got to the national championship for the first time in a while. I mean, for a season that started off with a loss to Northern Illinois, not too bad. But you'd want to win the Natty to kind of alleviate that loss.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Natty would have been nice there, but for Notre Dame, I feel like they're kind of ahead of schedule where Marcus Freeman wants them to be. So I think things are, um, I think he's building in the right direction. This Notre Dame team, but ultimately, uh, you know, a lot of inexperience on this team, as well as just there wasn't a lot of size too. And I think that was like the biggest point with this Notre Dame team is that they were very undersized compared to everyone that they faced, and I think you saw that kind of taking its toll here in this national title game. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think 18 playoff would have worked a hell of a lot better um, than a 12 team, because you probably would have had somewhat closer games than this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, um, we're going to be stuck with 12 teams for at least another year, and probably it's probably going to get expanded after next year, because this is just the first contract, which is, or the first year of the 2 year contract for the 12 team playoff, and yeah, I feel like because of the TV numbers, they're probably going to be like, hey, let's expand it to 16 instead, and now you're really fucking going to get some terrible, terrible matchups. But yeah, so yeah, I wanted to also cover, Ben Johnson, head coach of the Chicago Bears. We did touch on that, but I think that it's pretty big news if you ask me. But anyways, yeah, has a terrible game as a OC, and 48 hours later, he's the head coach of the Chicago Bears. Uh, it sucks as a Lions fan because obviously you wanted him to stay, but we already knew he was leaving. But to a division rival now, that's where it's like a really big, kick in the nuts.
Yeah, and especially when it's to the division rival where you have a fan texting their quarterback, lying to them, saying, "Hey, Ben Johnson's going to the Lions," or "Hey, I'm Ben Johnson, I'm coming to Chicago," and he falls for it, and now he's head coach of the Bears anyway. So I just think it's funny that they do that. My thing is, Ben Johnson's going from an organization where the GM, the head coach, and everyone wants to be on that same page. The Bears, they've made it very clear that the GM and the head coach are not going to be on the same page, and they're not going to be doing the same. And that's not going to work in Ben Johnson's favor. He wants to do things his way. He wants to sit there and he wants to be pretty and he wants to, you know, get too cute in certain scenarios, especially with a quarterback like Caleb Williams, who has capabilities and has talent. With that offense in Chicago that's been lackluster at best for however many years, he might get them their first 4,000-yard passer in history, but I don't know if it's going to really translate to much more success than they're already having, simply because A, he's not a head coach, and B, Ben Johnson really got cute in certain scenarios in Detroit, which led to turnovers, led to them losing games. Not completely directly, but like I mentioned when we were going over the Lions loss, why are you having Jameson Williams throw a pass in the third quarter of that game when you're down and Goff is not playing his best? I mean, hell, you take Goff out for 2 or 3 plays and Teddy Bridgewater hands the ball off to Jameson Williams and he busted for 61 yards. Why not just have him do that? So it's some of these small decisions that Ben Johnson has made where it's like, okay, I'm kind of okay with him leaving, but like you said, going to a division rival and one like Chicago where, like the Lions, they've kind of been the bottom feeder of the division for a while now. It's good for them. They're going to be better, hopefully, but at least we get to see him twice a year. Stick it to him.
Yeah, that's all we can hope for as Lions fans is just be able to fucking beat him every single fucking time we play, and hopefully win a Super Bowl before he does. So, and that's all we can really hope for now. But yeah, either way, it's brutal for the Lions. I mean, obviously, we knew this was coming one way or another, but you just hate to see it be going, to a rival there. So yeah. Anyways, that is going to do it for us tonight, Thursday. We are going to talk, obviously, mostly just very, very, very detailed into our NFC and AFC championship games, getting ourselves set for the Super Bowl. So it should be very, very, very exciting on Thursday. So with that said, guys, rate, review, subscribe, help us out. Let us know what you guys want to see more of. Check out our YouTube page, The Andrew and Ian Show. Follow us on Twitter at the Andrew N. Ian Show. Um, and yeah, we're going to keep growing this thing, guys, of course. Thank you guys again so much for listening. And we will see you guys on Thursday.